Hi, this is Kim Tank with Filmmakers Focus NYC. We have Steve and Joseph here. Hi. So I wanted to ask a little bit about yourself. First, tell us where you're from.
I'm actually from here, from New York City. I was born and raised in Jamaica, Queens.
Okay, Jamaica, Queens. You mentioned that you were into visual arts that you knew since the age of 5, which is really young. So how did you know?
I started reading comic books, and I used to look at the panels, and I liked the way that the story panels flowed on comic books. And so I used to take the comic books and actually start drawing the panels myself. And as I got better at it, I started creating my own stick figure characters and then fleshing them out and develop them into characters at just 5 years of age, and making visual stories, having the dialogue, the interactions, and just basically putting together almost in the fashion and form of a storyboard.
Yeah, I was going to say, already storyboarding at age 5. And then how did it progress from there? Did you just stick with comic books and drawing for a while?
As I got into my teens, about 13 years old, I started writing. And my first form of writing was basically novelizations. I used to like writing novelizations. I used to go to the library and pick up all of these different books, a lot of fictional books, and just read them over and over again. Stephen King, and he was one of my favorites. And so that's when I first started learning how to place a story together with the visuals. And so I just started creating kind of like comic book characters and stories and visuals. And then later on, I started relating my artwork as well as my stories to real life, to what we were experiencing in real life. But I stopped drawing and just started writing. And when I was about 19, I wrote my first screenplay.
Oh, very nice. What did you do with that? Was that just for your own entertainment? Or?
Well, actually, my very first screenplay was an actual inspiration from director James Cameron. James Cameron did Terminator around that time, Terminator 2. And I was so inspired with the visuals as well as the story, I went up and picked up the actual shooting screenplay, which you can get at any bookstore. And from that point, I said, this is what I want to do. I really want to write this. So I wrote a science fiction screenplay called Twin Fury, which was about 2 twin aliens from outer space. But it was basically a love story, which had never been done before in Hollywood. So I knew I was onto a great concept, and even at that age, I started taking it around Hollywood, going to studios, because I knew I had to get a development deal through a studio. That's something you couldn't do independently. And so I started getting into acquisition people, and production people, story analysis. And the only problem was, back that early, there were no real digital effects. So basically, if you didn't know Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or James Cameron, you pretty much had to come up with a way to kind of finance these things yourself. Maybe, do it the way that a cheap filmmaker would do, So, but I just stuck with trying to develop the film. And so I just kept trying to get this screenplay out there because I really believed in the story. But unfortunately, after several years of trying, about 5 years actually, I tried to get this screenplay developed into a feture film. And then afterwards, I just pretty much gave up on it and went more into independent filmmaking.
Okay, sounds good. It's always hard to do it yourself.
I didn't want to follow Corman. Corman did a lot of cheesy, low budgets that you could do with horror and sci-fi, and I felt like that would be robbing the audience, so I didn't want to do that. So I felt like if I'm going to do a project, it has to be quality. It has to be something that they're going to enjoy visually, and not sit there and laugh at how cheesy and cheap that it is and say, this is really ridiculous.
Right, that would take away from the story content.
Yeah, I'm not making a parody.
So while you're doing all this, you're working odd jobs, like you said, healthcare, security guards. What other things did you have to do?
I worked for car rentals. I always tried to find a job that was related in some way to filmmaking, production assistant work, or anything else like that. But it was funny because I could never get those jobs. So I felt like I was meant to work at the different jobs that I did have, the different occupations I did have, such as security or healthcare industry, because you get to meet people, and people make your stories. And so I started being around people, and I said, all of these people make for wonderful characters. So I felt like that helped me as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker to build more realistic characters, more three-dimensional characters, which you really, see in filmmaking. Like in Hollywood, they'll do a movie about a detective, and they don't actually know anything about a real detective, what the real detective is. Real detectives are lazy and laid back, and they're carrying files. But Hollywood will have them jumping over cars, doing backflips, and carrying a guitar and a gun at the same time. Just ridiculous stuff. So that being at those occupations, I really appreciate, because they actually do have you be able to develop better characters for your screenplay. You know, you can always make them, and that's what people can relate to. They're going to always be able to relate to the characters first. Not everything is about the visuals, especially as an indie filmmaker.
So is your main characters like kind of based off people you know, or is it more like the supporting characters or just people that you've run into before?
You know, the funny thing about filmmaking, usually for me, I come up with an idea as a story first. And then based on the story, I have a character, I have a character's name. And then from there, I'll try to develop the character. But sometimes, depending on what you're writing, it usually has a voice of its own. My very first short film was based on a woman who came to New York from Louisiana to try to have a singing career. She falls in love with a guy who has a dark past, a sinister past, and he turns her life upside down. Now, when I was developing her character, I wasn't basing it on anybody I knew. I just knew that she was from Louisiana, and I had never known anybody from Louisiana at that time, and that she was going to be Creole. And so I just pretty much kind of really developed it more from what was happening to her. Her character came more out of the situation that she was going through. And
sorry, is this the one that's called Secrets? Is that Dark Secrets, 1997?
It was originally called Things Go Wrong as a short film, but later I changed the title to Dark Secrets because who can relate to things go wrong? So it's better to do it as Dark Secrets.
Okay. So I saw that clip. What did you learn from that? Because you said that it had bad quality, and I mean that's your first one, so of course your first one's going to be like a starter.
Well, when you first do a film, you're very passionate. And the first thing I'll tell any aspiring filmmaker out there, follow your passion first. You can learn as you go. It's just like writing a screenplay. Just write it out and go back and revise it, edit it later. But just write it. Write from your passion. The things you're going to learn as a young budding filmmaker, you're going to learn about shots. You're going to learn about blocking. You're going to learn about staging. You're going to learn about interactions with the actors as well as with the cameras. You're going to learn about just if you're going to do things independently based on your budgets, or if you can afford to have maybe a film student come in as your assistant director, or even a production manager to watch your budget. So you learn a lot. The resolution was very low because it was a high-8 camcorder. And when you start making copies of that, it reduces the resolution. And the sound quality I absolutely knew nothing about, you know, such as having mics planted on you. So basically I used the built-in mic of the camcorder, which is bad for when you're having wind. So the thing I learned the most about that is if you're going to do your film on digital video camcorders, make sure you put your money into sound first. Sound is the most important thing. It doesn't matter the quality of the camera, because a lot of people are going to be into the story, but they have to hear what's going on. And so that sound is very important. You don't want it to be low budget, static sound, fade out. So the sound is the most important thing.
So do you think now you're pretty good at the sound thing? Like you know how to...
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
So you took some classes at NYU, and then you went to LA for a workshop?
Yeah, I attended the Warner Brothers Television Writers Workshop. I got in that program based on a spec screenplay that I wrote for Frasier. And the funny thing about it is, as an African-American, 9 times out of 10, they were expecting you to probably write a teleplay based on an African-American show at that time. But for some reason, I just wanted to do Frasier. I wanted to do something different, something that was more of a challenge to me. And so I started writing the teleplays, the specs, and I started watching the show, taping the show, and I realized the formula for the show. I said, wait a minute, Frasier and Niles are very well educated, but they're idiots. And that's where the humor derived from. And so that's where the first challenge of the show actually came from. So I got accepted into the program based on that. And afterwards, I was trying for a career in television writing, which was almost impossible without an agent.
And it's very different, too, writing for TV and writing for movies.
Yes, totally different, totally different. You're more on a deadline when you deal with television. Television is like a 9-to-5 job, basically, shot inside studios, usually Hollywood studios. So it's totally different. Even the format of the actual teleplay from a screenplay is totally different. But it's a beautiful experience because you're working with several of the writers, so that's great. And then you're working with all these creative actors and actresses, and you get time to really rehearse people to prepare before the actual taping of the show. So television writing is definitely a beautiful form of writing. With filmmaking, especially if you're an indie filmmaker, even if it's a big budget film, everything is on time constraint. Everything is about the film schedule and the budget, which are interrelated. You can't have the budget without the schedule. You can't have the schedule without the budget. So it's very time consuming, and you have to watch everything. So television is basically not the same way.
Right, that makes sense. So let's get into things that you've done in your projects. You had 2 sci-fis, 1 horror, 1 urban drama.
Yes.
And you're working on a comedy
Yes.
right now, and also something about zombies, I hear.
Yes. I'm actually working on a short zombie film. It's dealing with the zombie apocalypse, which is very popular right now. And I felt like the genre needed to be touched. Now, the short film I'm working on is actual dramatic, is serious. The comedy is also a zombie, but it's basically a funny like Shaun of the Dead. But the short film that we're working on right now, which goes into production next month, and that short film is an excellent experience. It's actually being directed by a friend of mine who's from Germany, and I'm the screenwriter, the associate producer. I'm also the person who's handling the budget, the scheduling, and everything else, because I just wanted to sit back and handle those business aspects of it while he went and brought out the creative aspects of it. But I'm the one that put the one sheet and everything else together, and I feel like this is something that's really going to take off because of what we're dealing with as far as a genre with zombies and horror and it being very popular, as well as just being able to get something out there that's diverse and different that can reach a wide scope audience. And so for me, that's even a challenge because most of my projects have been basically urban based and so very limited. And now I'm going after something that's more commercial, something that's more high concept. So it's great. And then you're actually dealing with special effects, makeup, and which is different. So the challenges are great. And I think that this project, which we're going to try to shoot in a month's time, I think that this project is really going to take off. I really got a lot of faith in this project, as well as the guy that's going to be directing it.
Okay. So do you relate more to being a writer than a director, or you just feel like this project in particular, you like a fresh set of eyes for it? Or?
I wanted to kind of sit back, and I'm definitely more of a screenwriter than I am a director, definitely, 100%, because I've been writing for so many years. I do want to direct, as I did with my short film, but I want to do it right. I want everything to be perfect. I'm very meticulous when it comes to projects or anything else. You know, I don't think that there's room for failures when there's budgets involved. I think you really have to know what you're doing. I think there has to be a level of perfection, because you're dealing with money. And so I want to sit back and watch how he works as a director because he has worked on more projects than I have. And he already has a great gist of the budget and exactly where to go with the marketing. And so I said, okay, I'm going to let you go ahead and direct instead of me. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a very visual person, so I can direct. I know about your long shots, your established shots, over-the-shoulder reverse shots, reaction shots, just about everything. Crane shots, whatever, and how those shots work with the budget. But I felt like, being that the project is being shot in digital and we originally were going to use Super 8 or 16 millimeter, but we decided to go digital. He has experience with Red 1, and so I said, okay, I'll let him go ahead and direct this, and I'll gain experience from watching him. So the next project, I'm definitely going to direct.
Okay, so sounds good. Where can we look for this short from? Is it going to be in festivals or theatrical?
It's going to be at Sundance Film Festival. It's also going to be up on YouTube and Vimeo. Okay. So we're definitely going to have the short at different festivals.
Okay,
yeah.
and what website can we find you on so that we can follow it?
Well, my website is not up yet because I'm actually going to put my website under my production company, which is Raw Concepts Entertainment. And so hopefully soon, I say in another 2 months, I'll have my production company up, and then all my projects will be up on my website. But you'll have to look under rawconceptsentertainment.com.
Okay, Raw Concepts. Okay, thank you, Stephen Joseph. This is Kim with Filmmakers Focus New York. Thanks for joining us.